Hello, my name is Jeremy with Foodborne Training Center. Today we're going to be talking about safety and wellness. The thing about safety and wellness is it's all about your protection and understanding how events can happen. So, for example, we're going to start talking with disease processes or infectious and communicable and route to transmission. An infectious disease is classified as something, a condition caused by growth and spread of harmful organisms within the body. Now, a communicable disease is a disease that can be spread from one person to another or one species to another. A really big thing to understand about this is that all communicable diseases are infectious, but not all infectious diseases are communicable. And that just pretty much means that just because I get sick, I have an infection, does not necessarily mean that you are going to get that infection as well. Whereas if you have somebody that has hepatitis or AIDS or the flu, for example, those are all infectious and they're communicable as well. Now, you have a pathogen, which is how these things spread. A pathogen is a microorganism capable of causing a disease in a host. And a host is anybody who is essentially carrying that pathogen, that disease process around. Now, the way these things move around, it happens a couple different ways. And it's called the routes of transmission, or the modes of transmission. Either one is acceptable. You have direct contact, where you are in direct contact with that pathogen. So, for example, let's say that we're working on a trauma patient. There's blood absolutely everywhere, and you have your gloves on, and you're delivering care, you're controlling the bleeding and all this other stuff. Well, you get to the hospital, and you notice that there was a hole that developed in your glove, or maybe one of your gloves fell off, or you took it off because it got slippery and you just kept working. Well, if you had a cut on your hand and that cut got opened, that would be an example of direct contact because your hand, which had that, which you were using to work on that patient, that came in direct contact with the blood that was carrying a pathogen such as hepatitis or something like that. That is how direct contact works. You must come in direct physical contact with that pathogen. Now, indirect contact, that involves the spread through droplets or through a vector, which a vector is essentially something that carries the pathogen from host to host. So an example of a vector would be the bubonic plague or the Black Death that ravaged Europe in the Middle Ages. So what happens is the bubonic plague, it was caused by rats, and because Europe didn't have it wasn't very hygienic at the time. They were throwing their waste products, their feces, trash into the street, and it would get swept up. There wasn't really a sewage system. They had contaminated water, food was everywhere, and this was something that brought in a lot of the rodents, a lot of the rats. Well, on the rats, they carried fleas, and the fleas carried the plague. Well, these fleas would infect somebody. They would bite them. They would hop off, get on a rat, go to somebody else, and bite them, and that is how the spread. And as the fleas repopulated, they were starting to carry the plague. So what was happening was it just spread and spread and spread and spread. And something else about the plague is not only did it jump from fleas to humans, but it could also spread from human to human. So if you had one person that contracted the virus, anybody that came in contact with them was also susceptible of it. Hand washing, hand hygiene was not a thing. And it just led to a lot of people getting sick and almost complete eradication of certain population groups. Now, you also have foodborne transmission, which is For example, food poisoning. You have an infected a pathogen that hops onto your food, whether it be through unwashed hands, improperly cooked meat, improperly handled foods, and you ingest it, you eat it, it sits in your belly, it then just proceeds to wreak havoc on your body until you either fight the infection off or you die. And those are really the big things there. And then you also have airborne, which that's from sneezing, coughing, breathing on somebody. And this is why during flu season, you go to the hospital, you're supposed to be wearing a mask. And as an EMS provider, during flu season, if you get sent out to a sick person, it'd be very wise for you to wear a mask whenever you go on scene, because you don't want to contract the flu, because what that's going to do is that's going to prevent your ability of coming to work, and it's also going to hinder your ability to make money, and you can also bring that disease home that you got from a patient at work home to your family and friends, and that's not what we want to do. And the way that we do this, the way that we prevent bringing these diseases home and contracting these diseases and these illnesses ourselves, is through the use of standard precautions. Now, standard precautions, they're designed to prevent workers from coming in contact with substance or germs carried by patients. It's you have gloves. That's part of the standard precautions. You're expected to wash your hands after every patient contact, and hopefully before, but it is a little impractical in our line of work for you to wash your hands before and after every patient contact sometimes, especially if it's really busy, but at the end of the day, you still have to protect yourself. And you got to keep in mind that we're working in a different environment than the physicians and the nurses are at the hospital. If you cannot wash your hands, you need to use hand sanitizer until you're able to wash your hands, because as they advertise, the alcohol and in the hand sanitizer, it'll kill 99.99% of all bacteria. It's just one of those things that we can use to protect ourselves. So keep some hand sanitizer on your truck, use it whenever you can, and stay safe at the end of the day. Another thing you can do to prevent yourself from getting sick is never recap needles, especially if they contain blood on them. So for example, if you get an IV and you miss it, don't take the IV out, take the needle out, and then try to place the catheter back on the needle. That's going to put you at an increased risk of sticking yourself. If you give your patient a medication through the intramuscular route, you need to throw that immediately into the sharp container. That way you don't accidentally stab yourself in the process. Don't reuse the same needle. Just things that anytime you use a sharp, anytime you use anything that has come in contact with blood or any other substance, it needs to go immediately into the sharp container, which is a puncture-proof container that is designed to be able to hold these sharp objects. And you should have a sharp container, on your truck. You should have a sharp container in your jump bag. And your jump bag is designed to be carried onto every call, and it should contain everything that you need for the first 5 minutes of your call. So again, we went over the disease transmission processes, went over how to keep ourselves safe, and we also went over communicable and infectious diseases. Remember, protect yourself. Not all infectious diseases are communicable, but all communicable diseases are infectious.